At this point, we're looking at some of the um, lab activities that normally you would do in lab. Unfortunately, one of them you definitely cannot do at home, and it's one of the ones that I like doing the best. But let's talk about both of them. The first one, the one that you really can't do at home, this is a measurement of ventilation. If you were a pulmonary doctor, then you would be interested in many measurements of how well your patient is breathing, how well they are able to breathe. And we will be covering just some of those measurements in the rest of today's respiratory lab. But believe me, there are a ton of them. Your doctor wants to know how quickly you can exhale, how quickly you can inhale, how much you can inhale, how much you can exhale, all kinds of things. The devices that are used to take these measurements are known as spirometers. And the spirometer we usually use in lab is a pretty antiquated one, but it gets the job done. These are some of the respiratory volumes that you need to know, but not all of them, okay? You will need to know tidal volume, inspiratory reserve, expiratory reserve, residual volume, but you also need to know vital capacity. I think vital capacity is on the next slide, all right? So make sure that you learn all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, right? Let's start with definitions. Tidal volume is the volume of air that you inhale and exhale in one quiet breath. While you're just sitting there listening to this video, you inhale a little bit, you exhale a little bit, you inhale a little bit, you exhale a little bit. At the top of your normal inhale, if something surprised you, you could gasp and you could go, oh my gosh. So there is room to inhale above what you normally do. That room to inhale above what you normally do is known as inspiratory reserve volume. That's the air in excess of tidal inspiration that can be inhaled with maximum effort, right? So tidal volume is a little bit, it's just like 500 milliliters, like half of a liter. It's not very much. But if you needed to, you could inhale a whole bunch more than that. Also, when you're just breathing in and out, in and out, in and out, if all of a sudden you coughed, you could cough out more than you normally exhale, right? That would be partly your expiratory reserve volume. That's the air in excess of your tidal expiration that could be exhaled with maximal effort. And then there is something called residual volume. If you exhale as hard as you possibly can, there is a certain volume of air that's going to remain in your lungs. You're glad it's there. We'll talk about why in the lecture part of the class, but you really need for that little bit of residual volume to be there. Okay, so that's 4 of them. Let's talk about one more. Let's talk about vital capacity. Okay, so the respiratory volumes also include vital capacity. If you were to add up your tidal volume plus your inspiratory reserve plus your expiratory reserve plus your residual volume, if you just added up your inspiratory reserve, your tidal volume, and your expiratory reserve, these 3 things together, that is your vital capacity. And your vital capacity is the total volume of air that you could exhale with maximum effort after inhaling as much as you possibly could. So this is a graph of what things might look like. Let's imagine you're just inhaling and exhaling quietly while you're watching this video. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, tidal volume, right? So here you are, you're doing tidal volume, and I go, quick, inhale as much as you can. You could inhale all the way up to there. The difference between what you normally would inhale and how much you could if you wanted to, that is called the inspiratory reserve volume. All right? Now, here we've got inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Okay, exhale as much as you possibly can. The extra that you could exhale more than you normally do is called the expiratory reserve volume. And the thing that we usually do in lab is I have you inhale as much as you possibly can, and then exhale it all out. And we measure this. And this is vital capacity right here. I've kind of grayed out the terms on this image that you don't need to know. So these are the different lung volumes that you need to know for next week's quiz. This is just another way of depicting the same things. I've grayed out the images you don't need to know. Tidal volume. This is the extra you could exhale. That's called expiratory reserve. This is the extra you could inhale. That's inspiratory reserve. And if I measure, if you inhale as much as you can and then exhale it all out, how much is it? That is vital capacity. Great. Now, the other lab activity is something that's fun to do. I'd recommend you try doing at home. Heck, you're trapped in the house. You got nothing better to do. The strange things about human respiration is that your how quickly you are breathing is not being dictated by how much oxygen is in your blood. Let me say that again. The rate at which you are breathing, how quickly and how deeply you are breathing, you would imagine that is regulated based on how much oxygen is in your blood, but it's not. It's actually being regulated by how much of that waste product, CO2, carbon dioxide, is in your blood. The more carbon dioxide, the faster and deeper you breathe. The less carbon dioxide, the more slowly you will breathe. And we're going to talk about that more when we get to the lecture part of the class. But in brief, it is difficult for your physiology as a human to accurately and quickly measure the amount of oxygen in your blood minute by minute, but it is very easy to accurately measure the amount of CO2 that's in your blood, particularly because the more CO2 that's in your blood, the more acidic your blood becomes. So it is simply easy to quickly and accurately measure the waste product, so your body measures the waste product. Let me try and draw a little graph. Oh, it's always a joke watching me draw on here, isn't it? Wait, let me try this pen. Okay. So I am going to make a little graph. And this way is time. Let's imagine you're trying to hold your breath. That's what the lab activity is for today. So you're inhaling and exhaling and inhaling and exhaling. And when you inhale, oxygen goes up and CO2 goes down. And when you exhale, CO2 goes up and oxygen goes down, right? So now I'm going to ask you to hold your breath. And as you hold your breath, you do run out of oxygen. But while you're running out of oxygen, CO2 levels build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, until the moment that you feel like you can't hold your breath a second longer, and then you'll go, and then you'll take a deep breath, and then you'll go back to breathing normally, okay? Now, I want you to notice that we were looking at what CO2 is doing, okay? So the blue line is carbon dioxide, CO2. That is so sad. Okay. But what your body actually does care, it really does care about oxygen. So what was going on with the oxygen while you were holding your breath? If your oxygen levels started off here, while you were holding your breath, your oxygen levels did go down. Okay? Your body knows that as CO2 levels build up, when you're holding your breath, oxygen levels are going down. So the system was set up to measure CO2 because it's easy to do that quickly and accurately, and it does stand as a proxy for the higher the CO2, the lower is the oxygen, so you will set things up so that your CO2 levels will be within a sweet spot. So unlike the heart, the breathing does require a suggestion from the brain that you should take a breath, okay? That's different. Your heart goes whether your brain tells it to or not. But if your brain does not specifically tell your diaphragm to contract, you will not breathe. And that is why if someone injures their neck super, super high, then they may be completely conscious but unable to breathe. And how quickly you breathe is complicated. We're actually only going to be talking about the parts in the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is going to be controlling mostly your respiratory rate, just like it was busy controlling your heart rate. Now, it is possible for the conscious parts of your mind to send commands down to your medulla oblongata to change your rate of breathing. So if I ask you, hey, right now, I want you to inhale and exhale to the tempo of this song I'm playing, you could do that. You can't do that with your heart, but you can with your breathing. However, most of the time, you're not thinking at all about your breathing. Most of the time, you're only thinking about something else, and your brain is controlling this independently. I'm going to go to one last video to describe this particular lab activity. And so this should be video number 4 coming up.